Let's go. What a huge win for UCLA. They had to eke it out late, but beating a top 10 Michigan State, boy, do I feel great.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. It's your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Where we get started, UCLA knocks off a top 10 Michigan State team, giving them just their second loss in Big Ten play, 2 in a row, and changing the hierarchy in the Big Ten title race. All right, Michigan State falls to 18-4, 9-2 after they get swept on their LA West Coast road trip. UCLA now 17-6, 6 wins in a row, 8-4 in conference play. No, by the way, UCLA is currently 2 games out, creeping up the Big Ten standings, poking at maybe getting a top 4 outside chance at a top 3 Big Ten finish, but they're really making their case for a much better seed in the NCAA tournament. This win proves to me the Bruins are back after the Mick Cronin call-out. I was very tough on them. Mick Cronin was certainly tough on them, and they won this game. Now, let's kind of sit down before I get into the nitty-gritty with the stats. UCLA had to win this game. After USC beat Michigan State the other day, that just showcased the Spartans are vulnerable. And with them being on the West Coast, I wondered how, if they'd have their legs underneath them, it'd be a little chaotic. It should be an energetic crowd for UCLA on Tuesday, which it very much was at Pauley Pavilion. You have to win that game. When these Midwest teams come west, you have to hold serve at home, which made that Michigan game all the more devastating when they couldn't come back and win that game. For the large portion of this game, UCLA was winning by 8 to 10 points, holding on, and then Michigan State went on a run late, took the lead. It was back and forth the last 7 or so minutes, and then we got a big open 3 made by Stefanovic, some key defensive stops, and then the game winner by Eric Dailey Jr., who by no stretch played well offensively. This is a tough matchup. Michigan State isn't overly big, but they're super athletic enough to have UCLA's secret weapon, Adamara, be ineffective. 6 points on 3 of 9 shooting. Most of the UCLA players missed 5 or more shots and did so inefficiently. All right, this could have very much been a very different game if it's in East Lansing on a neutral court, but it's not. And that still adds to the fact that USC has beat Illinois and beat Michigan State, and now they're on the bubble of the NCAA tournament. What does this do for UCLA standing, who now has their first top 10 win of the year, although Michigan State might fall out of the top 10 by the next time the poll comes out next week? That's a huge quad 1 win. UCLA got one over Oregon. They got one over Wisconsin. That's 3 quad 1 wins in a segment where I was hoping this team would go maybe 5-2 in their West Coast stint, right? The early home games against Iowa and Wisconsin, the 2 road games, and 3 straight home games. I was hoping, okay, they can go 5-2. That's a really good stretch. UCLA is 6-0 on the West Coast after having everything go against them on the East Coast. You got a streaking Maryland team, a scrappy Rutgers team. Everything was going against UCLA, and they had to respond. Well, in comes Iowa. Then came a scrappy, gutsy performance by Mata to come out of nowhere and dominate Wisconsin. They go up north, beat Washington without Bilodeau. They beat USC, who we saw beat Michigan State and dominated them for almost 30 to 35 minutes. And they come out, they're pretty much healthy, learning the rotations. Cronin kept it pretty short, leaning on his starting 5, not as much as we've seen in previous years, but leaned on them a bit more tonight, and UCLA got the job done. That's another close victory. UCLA's been very good in 1-possession games this year. Their only loss, I believe, was the North Carolina game. That was their biggest choke of the year. UCLA wins this game 63-61. Led by 7 at the break, led by 11 at some point in the second half. And all applause to Michigan State, right? This is the second game of a long extended West Coast road trip, and they fought. And when UCLA is leading this game by double figures in the second half, when this team's coming west in front of a rockin' home crowd, this sets the tone for the rest of the season, right? You got Penn State. You still got a couple of home games left in the year. This is one that not only easily clinches the berth, that they haven't clinched one already. UCLA's creeping up the bracketology. What UCLA needs to go into a deep tournament run, even more so this year than in years previous, they must stay on the West Coast. You don't want to go east. You don't want to have to go to play to Providence in the first round game, right? You don't want to go to Rhode Island and go all the way across the country, another East Coast trip that adds to the miles that UCLA is going to log up on their next 2 trips, going to Illinois and Indiana, and then going to play Northwestern and Purdue. That's another top 10 team UCLA has yet to play, who is ahead of them in the Big Ten standings. That's on the road. So this is a huge win. You can't blow a double-digit lead in the second half against a team that's making a West Coast trip from East Lansing, Michigan, and the Bruins held serve and won. Typical Mick Cronin, Tom Izzo battle. Ugly offense, good defense, and you wonder, UCLA didn't shoot well. Michigan State didn't shoot that well either, and they still hit a couple of threes. They got the job done at the line, especially in the second half. And UCLA only turned it over 3 times. They forced a lot of Michigan State turnovers and got a great win. Absolutely huge win. Even if Michigan State turns out to be overrated, I'm not sure if they really are, but they got a great win, huge win, best win of the year for UCLA in terms of marquee name value. Oregon slumping. Wisconsin hasn't done enough to creep into that top 15, top 10 just yet this year. Beating Michigan State solidifies UCLA's status, I think, as a contender. Now, if they go play on a court where there's more Michigan State fans, you play in a neutral court, you go play in East Lansing, things could be very different. You play them in the Big Ten tournament, Michigan State could probably win this game. But think, all right, they've each taken each other's best shot. UCLA won the game. That's what they need. I think the best path for UCLA location-wise in the tournament, be a 4 or 5 seed, play the first round in Denver, be in the West Regional, which means then they could play if they go to a second weekend in San Francisco. It's not an easy bracket if you play as a 4 or 5 seed, but I think that's the best case scenario for UCLA, unless they win the rest of their games, which they won't. They go and creep closer to the West Regional, and you play your first round games in Denver, beat a scrappy mid-major, play a scrappy 4 or 5 seed, and then you get to take on a 1 seed in your Sweet 16. UCLA, with their 6 losses, that's what they're going to have to live with, considering they're going to take another 1 or 2, even as good as they've played. These games coming up are going to be very tough. But a huge win for UCLA, who continues to display the clutch gene. Eric Dailey Jr. in 21 minutes, 9 points, but the game winner. You see Sky Clark, who took a lot of shots. I like an aggressive Sky Clark. Didn't make them. Ended up with 14 points. I'm okay with that. Tyler Bilodeau. I didn't like the late game fadeaway for the win. I think you could get a better close to the shot, leaning to the hoop when Bilodeau and UCLA were going for the lead late in a tie game against Michigan State, but he did all right in a matchup that probably didn't favor many of the UCLA players. Most of these Bruins couldn't shoot that well. 7 of 28 for 3 isn't going to get it done. But when you shoot worse from 3, you shoot worse from the free throw line, you force more turnovers against Michigan State, you clog the lane, you even saw Mick Cronin bust out a zone. How often do the Bruins play a zone under Cronin? All right, hardly. Big time win in one of the worst games we've seen of extensive Adai Mata this year, where he didn't shoot the ball as well. A couple of rebounds, a couple of assists, a couple of blocks, but it wasn't his most dominant performance. All right, maybe one of those matchups where those athletic, just undersized teams, but they have enough size for Michigan State, undersized compared to Adai Mata, can do enough to throw off his rhythm. Now, speak about a clutch Lazar Stefanovic, 13 minutes, comes in 3 of 3, gets late minutes. Cronin trusts him. If the game's on the line and the guy's cold, Cronin is always going to trust Lazar Stefanovic. The UCLA down 1, wide open 3, Stefanovic is like, I'm going to bury this, and splashes that bad boy, right? Maybe last year he doesn't make that shot as a Bruin. This year, less pressure, less on him, wide open. He come in, score a crucial 8 points in a game where UCLA only had 2 players over double figures. Stefanovic was the only efficient Bruin if you include Sebastian Mack with a couple of shots. Stefanovic made all his shots. In a game where both teams couldn't make their threes, couldn't make their shots, UCLA's miniature secret weapon is their depth, because their 10th guy eighth, whatever number you want to throw Stefanovic, can close games on the court defensively and offensively and make clutch buckets. That's why this team is better, because they don't need Stefanovic on minute 36 to hit that open three like they did last year, or as he probably needed to do in Utah. He can come in 13 minutes, be fresh, be wide open, no pressure in the world, even though the game's on the line, and bury a three. Huge. Absolutely huge. The defense played up. UCLA got absolutely blasted on the glass. Not a positive sign, but they did just enough to win this game. And that's what they needed. A resume builder to once again shock those people making the bracketology, shock the national media to where UCLA should be in the top 25. Now, don't get me wrong. Penn State's no slouch. They're going to come in, and I think Penn State might come against UCLA and put up a 10-point lead. Shell shock the Bruins after a lot of energy, an extended layover or layoff prior to a home game on a Saturday afternoon, and then immediately into Illinois. This is a dangerous stretch for UCLA where they could easily lose 3 in a row again and still be just as qualified to go on a deep run in the tournament, in the Big Ten tournament, the NCAA tournament, because they've beaten some top-tier teams. They play good enough defense, and when teams play good enough defense, it's this ugly, low-scoring game. They've beaten the Arizonas, who would love another crack at them. Michigan State wants the same thing. But the Bruins have been really good at making late-game buckets by beating Arizona, by beating Oregon, by beating Wisconsin, doing the same thing against Michigan State, mostly in low-scoring games if you don't include that Wisconsin game. But the Bruins have established who they lean on in a certain matchup. Today, they leaned a lot on Bilodeau, Dailey Jr., Clark, Andrews, Johnson. But when Stefanovic is making shots, he's going to give Stefanovic the shot over Kobe Johnson. It's a great win. It's great considering UCLA had 8 steals, kept the Spartans off their toes. Michigan State made sure UCLA could not score. And again, what was the line before? Like 2.5 pregame line? That's exactly how this game finished. Exactly how it finished. I don't see how UCLA is not ranked, even with a loss to Penn State. UCLA should be one of those teams that increases its stature, even if they lose to Penn State at home. That is my controversial take from this game. UCLA, with what they've done, has deserved to be in the top 25, even if they lose to Penn State. They should increase their seeding by a whole line and a half, whether they're pushing a top 6 seed or maybe a low 5, earning themselves either a closer West Coast matchup, maybe to Seattle in the first round, or playing in Denver, because the Bruins will desperately need it when they're going to go to Indiana 3 times in the span of a month. From now to the next month, UCLA month plus, they're going to go to Indiana, the state of Indiana, as an LA-based team 3 times. That's going to wear on this team. It will. Whether it's in losses, come tournament time, maybe an early Big Ten exit. It will. As much as Cronin is learning how to rest, how to keep the energy up, UCLA can't be shell-shocked when Penn State comes to town, although I expect it. And then the trip coming up should not damper your hopes. It is just what's the log of the Big Ten season. You bring in Michigan State. They took their 2 L's on the West Coast, and UCLA is going to be dished out to the eastern side of the Big Ten, right? Even though there's Rutgers and Maryland, they already took those 2 L's in front of a raucous Illinois crowd, a raucous Indiana crowd, ready with just a scrappy Penn State team waiting to mess everything up in between all those. Still a huge win, a gritty win, one that they should not have lost and hopefully could have expanded the lead. But the physicality of Michigan State showcased, hey, we can attack UCLA's weakness, which is still the lack of rebounding and the lack of a true post presence, even with Mata's continual growth. Now, I'd love to see how these 2 teams match up later in the year when they both battle it out, potentially on a neutral court. Maybe it won't go UCLA's way, but it did, and that's all that counts right now, and you hope you don't face Michigan State anywhere in a tournament scenario, because they got a big win today, and I am excited. If you're wondering, what energy am I talking about? You should have been in Pauley Pavilion, and that's why you got to go to Game Time. If you're looking for tickets to the next big event, which was the UCLA-Michigan State game, concert, comedy shows, sports games, the right ticket can be found with Game Time Picks. It's never been easier. Let's tell you how it works. Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you, curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste your time searching through endless ticket searchings and listings. I've been using Game Time Picks to go say, hey, what are these prices? When you're comparing prices, hey, good zone deals and getting a cheap price. And if you toggle the right feature, you get to see the price up front. So you press pay, you get to know that's the exact number you're paying with Game Time. You can get a super deal for prime seats. I've done that when I was in New York. I did that when I was going to a big postseason game as a big Dodgers fan. And you're covered with Game Time's lowest price guarantee. You'll find a better deal elsewhere. They'll refund you 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, look at that. The Bruins surging. Who would have thought the way 2025 started for UCLA on the court, that now they are still in fifth place in the Big Ten, but they're 2 games out of first. I think too much has been done for UCLA in the loss column to expect a late season surge to get first place, let alone second place, because the 3 top teams only have 2 losses, UCLA losing to Michigan as one of them. But they remain tied with Wisconsin. Then they'll be, in fourth place, technically in fourth place. But with the schedule as uneven as it is, Wisconsin could win on a day before UCLA. So the Bruins are a top 4 team, or if Maryland wins, then UCLA could be in 4th, 5th, or 6th place, depending on how things shake up when you listen to this. The Bruins are in the upper echelon. They were picked to finish 3rd, I believe, right, in the preseason Big Ten poll. And how it's looking, you look at Purdue, you look at some of these competitive teams, UCLA scratched this one out, which is how I felt they should have done against Michigan. As good as I think Michigan is, the momentum went UCLA's way, and they pulled it out. When Michigan State brought the momentum into their favor, UCLA gutted it out and won the game, which they need to do on their home court. Would have been more understandable if UCLA had a good 35-minute effort and it went Michigan State's way on the road, on a neutral court. But at home, you have to win that game, and they did. There's things Mick Cronin's not going to be pleased about, which was the little bit of a letdown. Michigan State coming back in, getting absolutely demolished on the boards. But they shared the ball, not a lot of ISO ball, and the defense came to play in a game where they needed to have their A-plus defensive effort against Michigan State team who can't shoot, but also plays equally good defense in a different way. Presents matchup problems for UCLA in a nightmare in some aspects when Mata can't go off. It's okay. Not every team does UCLA need Mata to score 30 points. Or obviously not 30 points, but 10, 15 points, 10 rebounds. That wasn't that night tonight. UCLA in front of a packed crowd with the energy, a Dailey Jr. bucket, and the Bruins get the job done. They're legit. They just got to get that 4 or 5 seed in the West, and they will be set potentially for a good run in the NCAA tournament, which is where it all really matters for UCLA. Setting up themselves for the best tournament run, and then let Cronin go to work and UCLA's defense lead them into a hopeful, deep NCAA tournament run. And just like that, we're going to talk more about this and what it means going forward for the Bruins in future episodes. Get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.